United Nations General Assembly was the scene of a celebration in 2015, when 193 member countries adopted the Sustainable Development Goals, a unanimous commitment to end poverty, fight inequality, and tackle climate change. The United Nations General Assembly was the scene of a celebration in 2015, when 193 member countries adopted the Sustainable Development Goals, a unanimous commitment to end poverty, fight inequality, and tackle climate change. The SDGs, the United Nations General Assembly, was the spirit of a celebration protecting the planet. When 193 member countries adopted the UNICEF Goodwill Ambassador Shakira asked global leaders to imagine poverty, where we achieve the goals by 2030 and tackle climate change.
Growing inequality exists in all of our nations. And all of our nations have work to do. And that includes here in the United States. And that's why today I am committing the United States to achieving the Sustainable Development Goals.
The Sustainable Development Goals build on the success of another 15-year plan created in the year 2000. The Millennium Development Goals sunset at the end of 2015.
That's why today I am
the MDGs halved extreme poverty, achieved equal primary education for girls and boys, and sustainable HIV infections by 40% of another many-year plan created in the year 2000. The Millennium SDGs go beyond the MDGs by improving the lives of everyone, the MDGs, and create a better world for future generations. Equal primary education for girls and boys, and sustainable development goals build on the success of another many-year plan created in the year 2000. The Millennium SDGs go beyond the MDGs by improving the lives of everyone, the MDGs, and create a better world for future generations. Equal primary education for girls and boys, and sustainable development goals build on the success of another many-year plan created in the year 2000. The Millennium SDGs go beyond the MDGs, and Pope Francis on the lives of everyone, the MDGs, and create a better world for future generations. Equal primary education for girls and boys, and sustainable development goals build on the success of another many-year plan created in the year 2000. The Millennium SDGs go beyond the MDGs, and Pope Francis on the lives of everyone, the MDGs, and create a better world for future generations. Equal primary education for girls and boys. 193 sustainable development committed to the success of another many-year plan created in the year 2000. The Millennium SDGs go beyond the journey starts Pope Francis on the lives of everyone, the MDGs, and create a better world for future generations. Primary education, our people on the planet. 193 sustainable development committed to the success of another many-year plan created in the year 2000. The Millennium SDGs go beyond the journey starts Pope Francis on the lives of everyone, the MDGs, and create a better world for future generations. Primary education, our people on the planet. 193 sustainable
Okay, I hope everyone have got the idea like what is going on, what we are going to talk about, everything, I'm sure. And that's what, of course, one of my very favorite thing, that is about the SDGs, Sustainable Development Goals. Okay, I hope everyone can see the screen very much in order. If there is some problem, you can always put into the chat box. By the way, our speaker is slightly delayed, of course. So that's why I think it's better for me to start my session. So I don't want to like somehow make you guys late for your sessions. Okay, so let's just start with that. And as I said, like if you face any problem, any issue, don't forget to put into the chat box. We'll be, of course, taking the questions, answering properly. Everything is back in order. Okay, so I hope you can hear me properly. It's everyone. If you have any problem, just put into the chat box. Okay. Okay, all good to go. Okay, let me see if all of you are here, by the way. Are you all here? Can you guys hear me? Let me unmute all of you. Bear with me. Okay, yes, you can unmute yourself. You can unmute yourself and just make sure that I'm sure that you guys are all already here and you can hear me properly and very much actually. So without further delay, let us start our session and let me share my slides to you guys. Okay, so I hope you can see me very well. Great. Hope everyone have enjoyed so far what we have put forward for you. Okay, so let's talk about like the understanding the SDGs, and of course the major aspect is actually the role of youth. That is very very important to understand. Like what is the role of youth right now, especially in understanding these SDGs, how youth can play a vital role. That is very important to understand right now. Okay, let's move on further. Okay, so that's about my slide introduction. My name is Ambassador Fawad Ali Inaga. I'm a life coach, SDG educate, and activist, Martin Nation trainer, consultant, and then so on. Of course, it's a quite big list. Never mind. Let's move on and know what we are going to do. So, what we're going to do, we're going to start with the history of SDGs actually. Like what are those SDGs? What about the, I mean, if you talk about the origin of the SDGs and how did they come from? Why did the United Nations member states actually came and then they gather all the 193 member states, they gather, and then the government across the world has actually decided on that, like why we need these and what is the right time to introduce these SDGs. I mean, there are plenty of people like when I was came across like to researching to study about. Honestly speaking, people doesn't know actually what all these SDGs all about. So I'm sure I will try my level best. When you leave today with this workshop, you all of you should have the basic idea about what are these sustainable development goals, how did they came across, why did they came across actually. That is a major thing to understand. So let's start from the history side. The idea behind is that the core of sustainable development goal is actually came across when the one you can say Stockholm Conference held in 1972, known as Human Environment, and the concept was One Earth concept, and that was the actually the idea came across that how we can help the world irresistibly or irresistibly, I must say, towards the sustainable development. That means like about the planet, shade of prosperity, social inclusion, and of course our motherland, that is the environment. One of the biggest and the key issue right now is the climate change. I hope everyone knows about that. It's the most important and the most critical right now, especially in the United Nations. So if I just go back, as I said, in 1972, the idea came back, which is like about 50 years, more or less. They met over there, they discussed, and the conference was the human environment. And then the idea was only one earth concept. And they have settled. They settle with the clear turning point, like what we need to focus on that. They need to focus on the international environmental issues, more the turning point about the international development of this international diplomacy, as well as the politics, and getting the orientation of the behavior of governments, businesses, citizens, students like you, of course, researchers, definitely some of you, activists, consumers, of course, and to getting themselves into a shared idea that could give us a picture to move having a sustainable world, or you can say a sustainable development of this nature, or this, here you can say, our motherland. So in the same time, there was an amazing quote has been given by the former president of the United States of America, President John F. Kennedy. He stated like, by defining our goal more clearly, by making it seem more manageable and less remote, we help all people to see, to draw hope from it and move irresistibly towards it. That was a very great quotation by the president, former president actually, of United States of America. Then after 15 years later, a commission was established under the leadership of Dr. Gro Harlem Brundtland, the Prime Minister of Norway, and that time the DG of WHO, World Health Organization actually. This particular commission was actually known before as the World Commission on Environment and Development, which then later on has been known as the Commission of, the Commission of Brundtland Commission actually. The idea behind for this establishment was actually to focus onto the sustainable development itself. And indeed, it went a very tremendous breakthrough. And the commission is actually came in this way that it says that the sustainable development meets the needs of the current generation. I'm telling you about after like 1972, and then after 15 years, like about early 90s somehow. So they stated like, this commission is more focused into the needs and the requirement of the current generation without compromising the ability of the future generation. That's what they actually thought. And the more core thing has came actually into intergenerational justice and intergenerational sustainability, that we, the current generation, have the responsibility to the future, manage our life and manage economies in such a way that we do not hinder the future generation to meeting their needs. Now, there's something that I need to emphasize over here, like whenever we talk about the SDGs, whenever we talk about sustainable development goals, or whenever we talk about the Agenda 2030, there's a very, very important and very common term always come and came across. It's called the future generation. They actually call the future generation because that is what the idea behind that they're focusing on to the future generation. So let's move forward into 1992 Rio Earth Summit actually. The Rio Earth Summit, of course. Now that concept that time has came, which has been embraced actually 5 years later on the 20th anniversary of the same conference, which was held actually in 1972, the Stockholm Conference actually. And then of course it had become actually the Earth Summit. And then of course the technical name at that time was being given the Conference on Earth and Development. So in that 1992 Rio Earth, they have adopted 3 amazing multilateral environmental agreement actually. The first one was actually United Nations Framework Convention on Climate Change. The second one was the Convention on a Biological Diversity for Biological Conservation. And the third and the very most important one was the United Nations Convention to combat desertification to stop the spread of desert in the dryland region of the world. So three multilateral, very important agreements have been majorly came together. And then after 20 years, when once again, like after this 1992, once again, the United Nations has actually gathered the member states in 2012, which was known as Rio Plus Conference. I mean, the logical name of that conference is actually Rio Plus 20. That was actually the idea behind. And then of course, then they have actually concern, the major concern, what they said, like in Rio Plus 20, the government said, like, what we supposed to do, how we put those sustainable development in the front of the world, where people everywhere understand the urgency, and they were like opening into the context of set of goals about you can say fighting poverty, and then they actually already adopted in 20, which was in 2000 actually, which was known as the Millennium Development Goals of DGs. I'm sure some of you do have the knowledge about that. MDGs, Millennium Development Goals, which were more focused in fighting poverty, about the health issues, about the you can say issue of AIDS, actually, child mortality, women mortality. But there was no concept about the Sustainable Development Goals that time. And the tenure for the MDGs was 2000 to 2015, actually. So this is actually the idea, and the government was actually thinking like how to move ahead, how to set up those amazing SDGs goals. And the idea was actually caught when the time between the 2000 to 2015 and then 2012, only three years were left at that time, that to finishing up actually the targets of MDGs, which was like being negotiated in Rio 20 plus, which I have just discussed to you guys, like how those SDGs, those sustainable development goals actually look like. That was like a main point of contention, I would say that. So what they actually did, the formation. So initially they proposed 300 goals, which the government have took like so many surveys, and they proposed like about 300 goals initially, which we can see right now 17, but earlier it was like suggested 300 goals. There was about 3 years of very, very reputed, very urgent negotiation held. And then they came across into 17 high priorities that more focus into the people, prosperity, planet, economic, social, and of course the environmental objectives. That was actually the main key into that. And that's what they have formed forming a cooperation between 2015 to 2030. And that's what we all knows about the Agenda 2030, actually, because they formed the targets have been settled and the tenure has been decided for 1.5 decade, means 15 years, from 2015 to 2030, actually. So then they have came across with these amazing 17 goals. which was actually acclamation on September 2015, 25th of September actually. That's now you can see at the front of me, the 17 amazing goals. You can see that like, and those goals have the 169 targets, okay, and they have the indicator, which is about 250, 55, 59 indicators to keep indicating, to keep scaling the ratio about like the measurement of all these amazing 17 goals. That was the actually the idea behind or what took into that. Okay, but when it comes to the formation, what really made them to work on to that side? That was a very important thing. There was the issue of massive environmental threats, such as global warming and the loss of biodiversity. And then there was the issue of inequalities as well between rich and the poor of all 193 member states. And that's why the United Nations came across the 17 amazing goals in 2015, 25th of September actually, which was like a remarkable range of inspiration, I must say. Or you can say the holistic approach, if you could say, which is actually the combination of 5 P's: people, planet, prosperity, peace and justice, partnership. That was the actually aim, and that's what they have actually forming into that. About the people, of course, they focus into end poverty and hunger in all forms and ensure dignity and equality. About the prosperity, they ensure the prosperous and fulfilling the life in harmony with the nature. About the planet, protect our planet, natural resources, and climate for the future generation. Again, it's about emphasizing on the future generation, of course. And then about the peace, that is a foster peaceful, just and inclusive societies. And the lastly is partnership, that is implement the agenda through a solid global partnership. So that's all actually the idea behind like the 5 P's behind the scene, of course, the main focus, the main holistic approach actually. So let's move on to deep understanding about like what is this from 1 to 7, which we actually call the people goal. From 1 till 7 is actually known as the people goal. It means now those 7 goals are actually relevant with the people, relevant with the mankind, relevant with the major issues, the major problem that the humankind and the mankind is actually facing. Starting from number 1, no poverty. Number 2, zero hunger. Number 3, good health and well-being. Number 4 is quality education. Number 5 is gender equality. Number 6 is clean water and sanitization. And the number 7 one is actually affordable and clean energy. So these 7, which is actually known as actually the people goal, are more relevant, or you can say are more alignment with regards to the mankind major issues. Like if you talk about the poverty, if you talk about hunger, if you talk about being a well-being, if you talk about the quality education, if you talk about gender equality, these are the necessaries and they all are relevant to the mankind, of course. So that's why these 7 goals are known as people goals. After that, 8 to 12, that's what we call the prosperity. That's what we call the goals that actually are helping to progress about the economy, about the industry, about the GDP of your country. So number 8 itself, it's good jobs and economic growth. Number 9 is industry, innovation, and if we talk about the betterment of the infrastructure. Number 10 is reduce inequalities. 11, sustainable cities and communities. 12 is the responsible consumption and production. So these were actually 5 prosperity goals, which helps the country, nations to progress, to progress and to boosting up their economy. More goals from 13 to 15 actually are known as the planet goals that talk about the planet, protecting our planet actually, or you can say the natural resources and climate change once again for the future generation. And those, of course, come into 13 to 15. 13 is the climate action, the issue of the climate change. 14 is about life below water. It's about the issue of like rising sea level, about the issue of island countries who are facing the issue. And then the issue of the pollution. And the 15th one is actually the life on land, about the ecological system, about the issue of the glacier freezing and the glacier melting thing. So these all are actually coming into the planet goal from 13 to 15. 16 is called peace and justice goal, number 16. That is actually the fostering peaceful and inclusive societies. It targets is actually focus on the frameworks onto the stakeholders, institutions, IGOs, NGOs, judiciary systems, different institutions, nation level, country level, local level, international level, all of you can say are combining into and then forming up and saying like without not having a peace and justice in all of those systems, you cannot achieve further into, you cannot move towards the development. And finally, the most important one and one of my favorite one actually is a partnership, which is really, really important. That is about the implement the agenda through a so solid global partnership actually that gather all those 16 massive SDGs goal into one collaboration, into one global and solid partnership. That is goal number 17 actually. So that's what actually you can see, or the bifurcation, I would say, the formation of all these amazing 17 goals. So let's talk about youth and how you and what is the importance for the youth in all those SDGs. That is what we really need to understand about, to understanding about SDGs. Believe me or not, but okay, if we see the world population 7.8 billion as of like the May report of 2020 according to the United Nations estimate, out of it the youth population stated 1.2 billion person between the age of you can say 15 to 24. That is actually what we call the youth population considerably. As per UNESCO, it's about 15 to 28. As per the African Charter, African Union Charter, actually, it goes to till 35 that they recognize the youth participation into that. So, but 15 to 24 years, as per the United Nations 2019 report, 1.2 billion persons actually the youth population into that. So, but when it comes to the SDGs, according to the 53 paragraph, Agenda 2030 clearly says the future of humanity and of our planet lies in our hands. It lies also in the hands of today's younger generation who will pass the torch to the future generation. As I said, let's keep reminding yourself the future generation, the future generation. All everywhere they're gonna say that. And indeed, would you believe once again or not? More than one third, actually, one third of these SDGs targets are actually referencing about the young people explicitly or implicitly, I would say, with more focus into the empowerment, participation, or you can say the well-being, I must say, into that. Now, all these 20 youth targets, now, if you talk about like all 17 goals, right? Especially in goal number 2 and goal number 4, education, 5, gender equality, goal number 8, decent work, goal number 10, inequality, and goal number 13, that is about the climate change. More focus about, you can say, onto the youth side. However, if I further break them into about the goal number 2, that is hunger, target 2.2, indicator 2.2, 2.1, and 2.2, 2.2, 2.2, 2.2 actually, focusing about the youth, goal number 4, on the education, of course, target 4.1, 4.2, 4.4, 4.6, and then spatially 4.5, focus on indigenous people, and of course about the children, vulnerable, especially in the vulnerable situation. And then if you talk about the indicators, 4.1, 4.1.1, 4.3.1, 4.4.1 actually. If we talk about 5, gender equality, target 5.1, 5.2, 5.3, indicator 5.2.1, 5.2.2, 5.3.1, and partially 5.3.2. And then we have the 8, we have the 10, and then 13. So every single goal, those 6 goals is emphasizing about the youth inclusion, youth empowerment. However, as I stated, about 1/3 of all those MDGs targets are telling you about the inclusion, the empowerment, the job requirements, the empowerment of the youth, and giving the recognition to the youth actually. That's the beauty of these SDGs actually. And of course, as I stated, of course, like young people involvement is actually the key, if you could say about like the call for the participation in a peaceful manner. If you focus into the goal number 16, like today's young generation is actually the catalyst, always says they are the catalyst for the nation building. And especially if you talk about the goal number 16, which is about the peaceful and justice, especially in the inclusive societies, and then 17, they are the bridge actually that create and they work onto the implementation side, the youngsters, of course. Let's move on further. If you talk about today, if you talk about the current, it's stated about 1.8 billion, which was, you can say 1.7 billion was 15 to 24, but 1.8 billion actually is between 10 to 24, which is actually being noted in current generation, like they are the largest generation in the history of youth, close to the 90% who is actually living in the developing nation. Like if you see, like I can see, like most of you are actually from the developing nations. So 90% of the entire world population are actually youth based in developing nations, and their number are expected to grow between 2015 to 2030 actually, and then I could say like connected to each other, like just like that they never before. Like young people want to, and I would say like already contributing to resilience to their communities, proposing innovation solutions, or you can say they are driving a social progress and inspiring the current political and judiciary system, and of course moving towards the change. That's what the importance of the youth. And that's why they are known actually the change agent. They are the mobilizer for the advancement of the SDGs, to improve the life of the people, about the health, about the education, about the planet, and of course about the one of the biggest issue is the climate change issues. And provided with the necessary skills and then opportunities needed to reach their potential, these young people like you guys are actually the driving force for supporting development, or you can say the contributing to the peace and security. And mainly, if I could say, the youth-led organizations also need to be encouraged and empowered to participate in translating or in informing of this amazing Agenda 2030 into local side, national side, or you can say to the regional policy that needs to be introduced, I must say. They play a very significant role. You guys, that is youth, a significant role for the implementation, monitoring, and reviewing of the agenda. And of course, holding the government accountable. That is the key, I must say. With political commitment and adequate resources, these youth are actually the most effective that could help for the better place to making this world more significant and progressing in a proper direction. So if we talk about the Secretary General envoy on youth spatially, she was appointed, you can see her picture at the front right now. She was appointed actually in 2017 as the youth envoy. Miss Jayatama Vikramayaka from Sri Lanka actually. So her job was actually to act as a global advocate, to be the voice of the youth. Like she works to ensure about the participation of young people in issues that matter to them, to giving them a voice, of course, or to championing the SDGs. And also she brings the work to the United Nations closer to if you talk about the young people across the world. She's actually working into that side. And that is why the United Nations itself fully embraces the young people's diversity in all its form, I must say. And indeed, UN employs and advocates for methods and approaches reflective of this diversity to make sure that young people can reach to their full engagement, empowerment, and indeed the development as well. And therefore, of course, that is why the United Nations recognizes the young people as the right holders and promotes and facilitates the transparency, accountability, and responsive from government, international organization, and of course, moving towards the, you can say, the young people. And that is why in September 2016, there was a class of 17 young leaders, which was announced, coming from different backgrounds, sectors, regions. They came together and they've been selected based on their past work and efforts to end poverty, climate change, and reduce inequality. Actually. But what really important today, that youth has to think about these 5 main streams that will helping you to championing all those 17 goals of SDGs as a critical thinker, as a change maker, as innovators, as a communicators, and then as a leaders. So if you talk about critical thinkers, young people actually involved and making sense for personal experiences and their expertise, fresh ideas, I would say, and asking questions about the world and raising the fingers just like that, just like what you do in your classes. That quality we need, a critical thinkers, I would say. You, of course, have the capacity to identify and challenging the existing power structure and barriers to change, and to expose all those issues like biasness or discrimination, contradiction, blah, 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 all those things. That is the capacity. That is what we call the critical thinkers. We also call them a change makers, because they have the power to act and mobilize others. Or if you talk about like youth activism is on the rise of the world, I must say. I mean, it's actually cross-border. It actually across the globe, globally, if you talk about the globalization, if you talk about the access of your social media, and even the current situation, the digital bridging, I must say, the digital globalization, that is something very important. And that is why the youth is called actually the change makers, innovators. Why we call these youth as the innovator? Because they bring the fresh perspectives, they bring the new ideas, they come up with the direct knowledge and insight of all those issues that is not even accessible from the earlier generation, and they face a problem. Well, at the end of the day, that's why we call they are innovators, communicators, of course. If we talk about the international development sector, about the world leaders who actually come to a historic, far-reaching agreement to actually improving the life of a people and the planet by 2030, that what you have looked so far about the SDGs. So these young people, that is you guys, are actually called as the biggest communicators, the biggest partner that could be creating a bridge between the development of the agenda, peer-to-peer, locals, nationals, cross borders, foreign affairs, foreign relations, a good communicators actually, region to regions, country to countries. That is you guys. And lastly, it's about the leaders. When young people, of course, being empowered with a great knowledge of the rights, or equipped with the leadership skills, they drive in a manner that, as I said before, act as the catalyst for the nation building because of their great strength, because they contribute to the development of a civic leadership skills among the young people, I must say. That is what is actually the vital role of youth, I must say. So these are the references that I've quoted, all those what I have just presented to you guys, what I've discussed with you guys. If you would like to go have a look into those resources very much. And I did personally plenty of certification, which I really highly recommend to you guys, is the SDG Academy courses. Okay, go to the SDG Academy, it's very good. And now I'm open for the question answering. But before I can move towards the question and answering, in conclusion, I would say, I know it's tough, it's hard. And bearing in mind with, with, with this global pandemic is going on. But what we really need to realize is actually the partnership, is actually the contribution from the civil societies, from the stakeholders, from different stakeholders, from IGOs, from NGOs, from governments, and then from country to country is actually the partnership, is actually to investment on these amazing SDGs. One of the biggest perspective has came across very recently, actually. I mean, during this COVID, like after this global pandemic that actually brutally disturbed, or you can say has actually, badly I must say, the infrastructure, the different structure of our different countries. People think that these SDGs are not realistic. But in my opinion, they are wrong. Literally. If you consider all those 17 goals, or let's bifurcate it that I've just did with you guys, having into the 5 Ps, people, prosperity, planet, peace and justice, and the partnership. They are actually giving you the frameworks, the walkthrough to all the governments that after hit brutally by this global pandemic, we have these walkthrough under those amazing 17 SDGs goals. So if the national authorities, if the government is actually walked through on these amazing 17 goals, they will somehow filling up those loopholes which have been witnessed, have been carried from last 8 to 10 months after this global pandemic. So these goals are realistic. Perhaps, maybe, in my opinion, the 2030 maybe is going to be lifted. Or it could be like they're going to add more years into that because after this, this global pandemic effect. But to saying that these 17 goals are not relevant, are not having the realistic, I'm sorry, that is absolutely not honest. That's what I just need to say into the conclusion. Now I am opening my floor for having a quick question and answering. And that's my detail, of course. So I'm going to put all my details into the chat box. If you would like to get in touch with me, you can get in touch with me for any kind of about more advancement of those SDGs, because this was just like to giving an idea about those SDGs and the formation and observation, of course, in they. So may God bless you all. Let's having a quick question and answers, and let's see what people think about. So raise your hand, I will unmute you. And if you have any question, you are more than welcome to ask. And again, please, I'm sure you did learn from this slide. I am pretty much sure. And the main thing which has been emphasizing is actually the youth participation. is actually the youth awareness. And those participation and those empowerment comes when you're raising your hand, when you dare to ask something, when you dare to answer a questioning to the authorities and to asking your teachers like, this is what I need to understand. Come on, let me see how many hands I can see that. Come on, raise your hand. Whatever is your question, I would love to answer. Come on, raise your hand if you have any questions related to that. I would love to answer all of this. Meanwhile, I've just dropped my contacts and everything into that. You can get in touch with me for any other sessions and, of course, about the courses for the SDGs as a trainer and activist, also the advocate. You're more than welcome for that. And thank you very much, Dr. Bakshi, for joining the session. So, guys, let's have a quick question if you have any, because our amazing workshop facilitator has already joined the very important one workshop right after this. Dr. Ruby Bakshi, all the way from Switzerland, she have already joined us. So yes, if you have any questions, please you may raise your hand, or perhaps you can put it into the chat box. Meanwhile, so we'll see what we can have. If not, no problem. Just take 5 minutes break. We'll come back in 5 minutes break with our third and the last workshop of the day. Okay. Thank you very much, everyone. And please drop your question. If you have any question, you can drop it. Okay. Thank you very much. Okay, everyone. So let's move on to our third and the last workshop of the day, which is quite amazing one. I can reckon that. Okay, so we'll be talking about in this workshop is role of emotional intelligence in your life, and that will be definitely being led by one of our amazing one. No doubt. I have no words to explain her, honestly speaking. So let's introduce her, Dr. Ruby Bakshi Kurdi. She is the founder president of Ray Academy Swiss. She's all the way from the Switzerland. And let's hear from Dr. Ruby. So over to you, Dr. Ruby.
Hello, everyone. Welcome to the presentation. I'm really looking forward to have an engaging audience, active audience, not just seeing there, sitting and watching, but actually participating with me. So you better be on your move, fasten your seat belts, and get set, go. Thank you so much, Ambassador Fawad, for such energizing talk. I was listening, I came here and I was already into it. And you set the mood rolling in terms of preparing the budding managers, the budding leaders for the nation. Thank you very much for setting the standard and setting the tone for the meeting today.